This morning, I'm really excited about this series more than I've ever been on any series. It may not seem like it, but I really am. I'm really passionate about this, and I'm going to invite Nicole to come join me on the stage because she's the one who sort of introduced me to this topic. She introduced me to this subject of generations. And she's also getting her master's in counseling. I think she is working her way to surpass me in the degrees I have. I think she is. She's not admitting that, but I think she's going to surpass me. She'll be Dr. Nicole Shah one of these days soon. But every time we talk about marriage or family or children, I bring her along because she's very gifted in that area. So welcome.
Thank you. I came across this topic of generations after reading a magazine. It was a Christian magazine. This was probably back in 2002, 2003. And I've always been fascinated with generations, your ancestry, because I have done lots of genealogy. I found an ancestor that came over to the colonies in the 1620s. And recently, I have found that I have connections in this area of the country. I found an ancestor who has lived in Franklin County. He was a pastor, and he was also very significant in the Revolutionary War. And later, I read a book that was on Abidan Shah, and the title just caught my attention. It was called Already Gone: Why Your Kids Will Quit Church and What You Can Do to Stop It. And this book is by Ken Ham. And this book opened my eyes, but it also helped me to understand why our children were walking away from their faith and how we as parents could help stop that and to instill a faith in them that would keep them in the church and in the truth.
The goal of this series is not to entertain, but to educate. So we will be giving you a lot of stats and information, but it's not just to kind of, pique your curiosity, but it's to help you understand where different generations are, especially the younger generation. The goal of this series is not to draw caricatures. If you know what a caricature is, when you go to a theme park or Disney World, there's somebody over there drawing an outline of your face or you, and they always highlight or they overemphasize certain features. So it looks like you, but it's not really it's funny. So we don't want to do that. We want to explain in a way that you come to know different generations, and especially the younger ones. Our goal is not to poke fun at. It's easy to do that. We can have a bunch of memes up on the screen and laugh about the craziness of this culture. But our goal is rather to stoke the faith of our younger generation. Not poke fun, but stoke faith, okay? To help them. What's the use of having this 3-part series and you walk away going, that was interesting, but it really doesn't impact your life, your children, your grandchildren. It doesn't impact this generation. What's the use? Now I want to make a statement. I hope you will remember that. If we care about the eternal destinies of our children and our grandchildren, then this series is not optional. If we care where our children and our grandchildren will spend eternity, then this series is not optional. And no person who is truly a believer will ever say, I don't care about all this stuff. Because if you truly care about Christianity and the gospel of Jesus Christ, then you will care about how you pass on the baton. Because I don't want to be standing before God on the day of judgment and say, on my watch, I failed. You put me in charge to share the gospel in my circle of influence, but I'm sorry, I failed. I was too preoccupied with my own sin, with my own hang-up, with my own drama, and I didn't have chance to share the gospel and reach the culture, and millions upon millions walked into eternity without Christ into a place called hell forever. So sorry. I want to be able to stand before Him and say, with what you blessed me, with the talents and the opportunities you gave us, that we shared the gospel the best we could in the power of the Holy Spirit. We loved people best we could and shared Jesus Christ with them. Now, the idea of passing on our faith to the next generation is not something we started. This is found all throughout Scripture. I'll give you just a few verses. The first one is from the book of Genesis, where God told Abraham in Genesis 17:7 that I will establish my covenant between me and you. But wait, and your descendants after you in their generations. Means I'm going to build this covenant with you, but also with your children for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and your descendants after you. Moses said to the children of Israel in Deuteronomy chapter 4:9, he said, only take heed to yourself and diligently keep yourself, lest you forget the things your eyes have seen, lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life. Now listen to this, and teach them to your children and your grandchildren. Isn't that amazing that God had to tell Moses so he would tell his children, the people of Israel, that please don't forget to teach this to your children and grandchildren. Psalm 78 verse 5, for he established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers, that they should make them known to their children, that the generation to come might know them, the children who would be born. So we're not just responsible for the ones who exist, is even the ones who are yet to be born. We are responsible for sharing the gospel with them. Even in the New Testament, we see this emphasis on passing the faith to the next generation. Remember the time when Jesus was teaching and a bunch of parents brought their little children and set them in his lap so that he would put his hand on them and bless them. And the disciples were discombobulated. They said, wait, what is this? Why are you putting your kids in his lap? This is adult stuff. This is not for children. And they rebuked the parents. And if you remember what Jesus did at that point, Jesus said, let the little children come to me and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. He made those children a priority. And then of course, in 2 Timothy chapter 1, Paul commends Timothy. But listen to the words he uses. 2 Timothy 1:4. He said, I'm greatly desiring to see you, being mindful of your tears, that I may be filled with joy when I call to remembrance the genuine faith that is in you, that first dwelt in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I'm persuaded it is in you also. Paul commends Timothy saying, I'm so proud of you, because you have that faith in you that was in your mother and your grandmother. Historians tell us that more than likely, Timothy's father was not saved. Timothy's mother and grandmother were diasporic Jewish people. It means they were Jewish people, but they were the ones who settled somewhere else instead of the promised land. When the gospel came to them, they not only believed, but they taught it to young Timothy. Isn't that beautiful? So this morning, as we walk through this message, I hope you will take the seriousness of what we're telling you, no matter what stage you are. If you are a great-grandparent and your children are gone, they're grown, old, and you have no need to raise new ones, you still need to listen. If you are grandparents, you definitely need to listen. You say, well, yeah, but that age is past us because they don't listen to us anymore. They've grown. Doesn't matter. There's something here for you that would help impact the culture for the gospel of Jesus Christ. Parents, of course, young people, siblings, no matter who you are, this message is essential.
The place we're going to start today is looking at an overview of the 6 generations that we're going to be discussing in this series. And before we do that, I had a picture of my family at one time. This was probably 1996, 1997. I had 5 generations in my family. So we had to take a picture of that. That's very unheard of nowadays. But anyway, let's look at the generations. The greatest generation is people born between 1901 and 1928. This generation is known as the GI generation. They endured the Great Depression and World War II. They took life as it came and made the best of it. This generation is dwindling, as you can imagine. The silent generation comes next, and this is people born between 1929 and 1945. This generation is known also as the builders. They fought in the Korean and the Vietnam Wars, and unlike the previous generation, they never had the roaring 20s. Life was grim. They just got through it. And then came the boomers. And these are people born between 1946 and 1964. And this generation, they were born in the prosperous post-World War II era. They saw the cultural pendulum swing to the opposite extreme, and it was accompanied with rock and roll, the television, civil rights movement. And even though there were lots of positive, there was negatives that took a toll on the traditional values, especially in marriage. This generation have the highest divorce rate of any generation. And so, even so, their cry for authenticity has much to do with teach the younger generation today. This generation brought out the need to seek help. Generation X. This is people born between 1965 and 1982. This is my generation. We were born in the Cold War era. We were referred to as the Busters, the MTV generation, or latchkey kids. Each designation represents a certain trait. We're the smallest generation. Why would you think that? Roe versus Wade came about in 1973. We were raised in a very promiscuous and provocative culture with MTV, and mostly we were without adult supervision, and this is where the light bulb went off for me. I often wondered, how is it that my generation became helicopter parents? This is it. Because we didn't have the parental supervision, so we decided we needed to supervise every facet of our children's lives. As this generation lived through the aftermath of divorce, we became skeptical of marriage. We waited later in life to get married, to have children. We didn't want the have-it-all lifestyle, but we prioritized marriage and family. The next generation are the millennials. These are people born between 1983 and 2000, and this generation was born with computers. They came of age at the turn of the millennium, and they are often referred to as Generation Me because they are self-focused because they are raised by helicopter parents. As they entered adulthood, they seem to be taking a little bit longer to figure things out. But here's the interesting thing. In a book called Sticking Points, Abidan Shah said he attributes this to a life stage rather than them being lazy. Millennials want to take their time to get things right. Guess what? They have a lower divorce rate than boomers and Gen Xers. So they must be doing something right. Generation Z, these are people born between 2001 and 2015. This generation has faced more crises than any of the previous ones. 9/11, ISIS, mass shootings, the pandemic, riots, the recession, and there's probably many more that I can't think of at this point. All of this news and information are coming to these people, these kids, on their phones. They are facing some of the worst moral and spiritual challenges. they're also facing gender dysphoria. Furthermore, this is very interesting, they are being told that the world is full of problems and it's up to them to solve them. And if they don't solve them, then they're the problem. In a book called A New Kind of Diversity, Tim Elmore says that mental health is their top priority, the Generation Z top priority. Sometimes we tend to want to make fun of this generation for that reason. We expect them to handle all of these crises like we would, but this generation, they're still kids. And Generation Alpha, this is people born or children born between 2016 into 2030, those who have not come yet. The oldest of this generation, barely 6, 7 years old. And this generation is playing with technology at younger and younger ages. We know some about this generation, but we don't know a lot more, and we have much more to learn.
Now, Nicole just gave you a quick overview. Maybe you knew all this information. Maybe this is coming new to you, NEW new to you, and you're just learning. It's like, wow, that's my generation. And there's so much more we can talk about. Books have been written, seminars are held about all these various generations. The question that comes is, well, so what? What do we do with this? Why are we so different? Well, maybe just the way we were raised or how the things happen in our culture, in our time, I guess just made us who we are. The question really is there a meaning in this madness? Is there a pattern that is there? Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 4 says, one generation passes away and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. This means there is a pattern that is taking place. For the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to go deep on this topic. Are you all ready for that? Oh, that's pathetic. Are you ready for that? Yes. That's a little better. The last service was okay. The one before that simply grunted. So I'm grateful that y'all at least say yes, okay? So we're going to go deep and talk about, is there a pattern? Is there a method in the madness? And there is. About 30 years ago, two individuals by the name of Bill Strauss and Neil Howe wrote a book called Generations. An amazing book. The subtitle is The History of America's Future, 1584 to 2069. Amazing book. It is not a perfect book. There's only one perfect book, which is what? The Bible. It has its weaknesses. Just like any theory, there are weaknesses to this. Now, I want us to listen very carefully, because if you don't, you're going to miss out on what I'm talking about here. This is very important. According to these gentlemen, generations come in a 4-stage cycle where each cycle or each generation lasts about 20 to 25 years, with the whole 4 generation being 80 to 90 years. So stay with me here. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4-stage cycles, each one 20 to 25 years, together being 80 to 90 years, known as a secellum. Secellum is the Latin for century. Why did this do that? I guess to sound more intelligent. You know, anytime you put a Latin word, it's got to be important. So it's a secellum. In American history, there have been several secellums with this 4-stage cycle. Each generation has a turning or a change in society and culture. The generation that is at its height in that particular cycle is known as the archetype of that cycle. Altogether, as I mentioned, 4 turnings, but with the 4th turning, there is a crisis, and the cycles begin again. 1, 2, 3, 4, crisis, cycle starts again. Now, seems like a lot, and I know you're trying to comprehend all of this, so turn your attention towards the screen. The first cycle in this 4-stage cycle is known as the high. The high is something that usually comes after a crisis. Remember, crisis started this cycle, so the high is the first cycle after a crisis. What is happening in the high? Society functions as it is supposed to be. It is marked by strong institutions, social collectivism, and weak individualism. The generation that is at its height is known as the idealist or the prophet generation. They are the indulged children of the post-crisis era. Remember, there's a crisis that led to this new cycle, the high. They are the children who came out of this crisis. They are the indulged ones. They become young crusaders. They want to fight the system. They want to figure out all the bureaucracy that you're hiding. But then somewhere, sound like the boomers? Somewhere in midlife they realize, oh shucks, we tore down too much. Well, it's too late now. They've become focused on morals and principles. All of a sudden, these things are very important to them. Now, I like the old hymns, preacher. And let me not indulge here. I'm like, you're talking like a generation. Stop being spiritual. Then comes the awakening in this four-stage cycle. The high, then the awakening. Society questions why it was built that way, and it challenges it. It is marked by increased personal and spiritual autonomy. You can't tell me how to do things. Social institutions are attacked. The generation that is at its height is the reactive archetype, also known as the NOMAD generation. They are underprotected because our parents were too busy at Woodstock having a good old time, nobody watching over us. They're underprotected and alienated during social chaos, and they are practical, tough, and they adapt to situations. Whatever you send our way, we'll make the best of it. Sounds like Gen Xers. The unraveling, from the high to the awakening to the unraveling, this is where society fails to function as it was designed to. It's beginning to crumble. It is marked by weak institutions that are distrusted. What happened to Enron? What happened to the banking system? Why are these systems collapsing? Because they were already falling apart. There is strong individualism in this period. The generation that is at its height is the civic archetype. They are the hero types. We're going to save the world. They're also the type who have been, are very protected, and they grow up very optimistic and overconfident since everyone got a ribbon and everyone got a trophy and everyone is special. Number one, who are we talking about here? The millennials. The wheels are turning. I'm going to go back over this in just a few moments, but I want to start turning the wheels, not just give you information and then finally we take off 90 miles an hour. No, we want to start moving. And this generation, the unraveling generation, the third cycle with the archetype of the hero, they've become good political leaders. What is the fourth stage in this Sakhalem crisis? So crisis comes, society falls apart, institutions are destroyed, but they will be rebuilt to function in a new way. Importance of community will be recognized. The generation at its height is the adaptive archetype, also known as the artist. What are their crises? Well, Nicole just listed some of those for you, from the 9/11 to the ISIS to somebody shooting at you randomly in your school or at a concert or at a mall. And then right when you think, okay, it's all good, your life gets taken away. It's called a pandemic. It's a crisis. So how does this generation respond? The archetype are the artists. They are overprotected because of the crisis. They are quick to conform. I have parents who come and tell me, the whole thing is over. Why is my kid still wearing a mask? I said, well, it's called a conformist generation. They're artists. So you got to help them. You have to show them courage. Remember, you were quick to put on the mask too, so now they're struggling and they're going, why are you not doing it? They follow processes. So this is still a process for them. But don't think for a moment that they're only scaredy cats. They're also very thoughtful. They're also very caring. The artist type, those who come through the crisis. So there are weaknesses to this theory, the generations. There are weaknesses. Why? Because it's only focused on America, for one. Secondly, it doesn't take into account the socioeconomic issues or the racial issues and a lot of other things. Having said that, it is a very important theory and it makes a lot of sense. Let's look at American history for a few moments. Ready for this? In 3 minutes, we're going to cover 300 years. Starting with the revolutionary Salem. The first Salem starts in 1701 with the awakening generation, the prophet, the idealist. This is 1701 to 1723, followed by the sandy-colored nomad, the reactive generation. Reacting, what are we reacting? For one, the colonies are going downhill. Too much craziness is happening. Hence comes a man by the name of George Whitefield, who begins to preach in the colonies, and we have the Great Awakening. And there's Jonathan Edwards who's preaching over there, and here comes John Wesley later on at the heels of that, because we need an awakening. But it's not over. It's followed by the Republican generation, where the hero, the civic-minded generation is the archetype. And what's the main thing happening there? It's known as the French and Indian War. And a certain individual by the name of George Washington, who distinguishes himself in the French and Indian War, he is the hero, just in time for the next cycle, which is the artist adaptive, and a crisis hits the colonies. What's the crisis? We're at war with the mother country. No taxation without representation. We're going to war. Everything is falling apart. Are we going to survive? Is Cornwallis going to come and destroy everything? What is going to happen next? It's the crisis generation, 1767 to 1791, which actually launches us into the next Salem. See how these crises works into the next one, which is a Civil War Salem, starting in 1792 to 1821 with the transcendental generation. What is happening here? The era of good feeling, the high. The era of good feeling, where President Jefferson gets two individuals by the name of Lewis and Clark and says, go figure out the West, go map out the West. And they come back and say, the land is indeed beautiful, beautiful valleys, rivers, mountains, plenty of room, so go west. Young man, go, plant yourself out there. It's a beautiful country, which is not over yet, because now comes the gilded generation, the nomad, the reactive, because too much industrialization is happening in this. We're losing our heart, so we need to sort of have a transcendental awakening. How many of you have heard the name Henry David Thoreau? Too much. I got to go back to nature. I need to take a walk in the... Some of y'all are educated. I can see that. It's great to hear some things. Other y'all are scared to give the wrong answer. And then there's Walden. I mean, it's about how we can get back to nature. We just too much, too quick. But it's not over, because in the same period, sort of kind of merged together, is the hero, the civic is also happening, because now there's an unrest taking place, which kind of leads us to a crisis. What is the crisis? Civil war. Threatening the union of our republic. Are we going to survive as a nation? It hasn't even been 100 years since we got freedom from England. It seems like we're falling apart. We're going to kill each other. Can you imagine that crisis of the Civil War? How is it going to work? And guess what generation is there? The artist, adaptive type. Following into Civil War begins. the great power Sekhalem. This time, it begins with the prophet, the idealist. We're going to go to war. We're going to fight this out. And it'll be what it'll be. And there's a war. But after the war, there is reconstruction. This is the Gilded Age, followed by the lost generation. Why lost? Because nobody really knows what happened to them. They sort of had this reconstruction, but then the banking system fails, and they build this massive Victorian homes that they cannot afford anymore. And so you have these massive homes on street corners all across America that you cannot afford anymore, and hence the movie, I forget the movie every time. I love the movie. What is it? It's a Wonderful Life. We have the actors of The Wonderful Life sitting here today, and they come to that house. Oh, George, don't throw that rock in that house. I love that place. Why is it empty? Because they can't afford it. All across America, this is how this ended up. The lost generation, they're like, oh, great house, big. Oh, we can't afford it. Foreclosed. The nomad, the reactive type, leading into the GI generation, the hero, the civic. Now we're going to the World War I, prohibition. All of this is happening, leading us into the silent generation, the artist, the adaptive. And they have a crisis. What is their crisis? Great Depression. What else is their crisis? Some maniac up in Europe comes marching, wants to take over the world and destroy all the Jewish people. And all our young men have to now get up and go to war. What generation is that? The artist, adaptive kind? Yes, we will do what needs to be done. But who's going to manage all the industry and the factories? Well, all our ladies will have to go to work. We will do what we have to do. We will conform. How interesting is that? Again, this theory is not perfect, but when we begin to understand how these cycles work, it begins to make sense why people did what they did. Because now comes the millennial Sekhalem, which is kind of leading into ours, starting with the high, which is the baby boom, the prophets, who said, we're going to make everything right that has been wronged. The prophet, the 1943 into the 60s, and then are born the Generation X, the nomad generation, just like we talked about. We don't trust too easily. We have been let down too many times. Followed by the millennial generation, society is crumbling. The social institutions are falling apart. They're not gone yet. And then the unraveling. What is unraveling? Culture wars. What we call truth is relative. Your truth is not my truth is not your truth. You cannot tell me how to live my life. Because what's right to you may not be right for me. And postmodernism comes in full force, leading into the homeland generation. Why do they call them homeland generation? Because that's when homeland security was implemented. The homeland generation comes, which is the artist adaptive kind, and our crisis is coming, which is what? The Great Recession, the war on terror, and what you don't have on the screen, which is the pandemic, the great crisis. Things begin to unravel, things begin to fall apart. What is the next generation? Nicole talked about this. After Gen Z comes, what people think is that Generation Alpha is just going downhill. Man, it's just going to get worse and worse. To the contrary, keep in mind, if Gen Z are the adaptive artist kind in the crisis generation, which is where society falls apart, institutions are destroyed, and you have to rebuild to function in a new way. By the way, isn't that true though? How many restaurants closed for the last time in the past couple of years? How many businesses shuttered, never to open again? How many churches are gone for good? You know, what scholars have said is this: a lot of these churches were already on their way out, and the pandemic sped up the process. They were done. But it came out of the crisis generation. So this is the adaptive archetype artist generation. They're quick to conform. They like processes. They are caring and thoughtful. But how about the alpha, the generation following? Keep in mind, the cycle begins again. It'll be the high, the prophet, the idealist type. Society functions as it's supposed to be. How many of y'all's businesses have said, man, we're back to work? I mean, you need to get back to work. Starbucks, stay home, do your thing. We support the culture. Now they're like, oh, you're going to show up to work. Did you hear that? The CEO of Starbucks said, I want all my employees showing up. Well, I thought you cared about them. Enough is enough. It's time to move on. A new cycle has begun. With strong institutions, social collectivism, weak individualism, the generation is the idealist, the prophet type. They are the indulged children of the post-crisis age who become young crusaders. And in midlife, they become focused on morals and principles. So do we need to give up on 6 years old and coming? No. To the contrary, God has great things in store. Our purpose here is to expose you, to help you think. I can preach a message in my sleep if I wanted to. I've preached so many. But what's the use? If it's not bringing you to action, what is the use? If it's not helping you in your life, you're simply checking things off. If it's not helping your children follow Jesus Christ and turn away from the culture, what is the use? This series is to help you understand. There is hope. But there's going to be a fight. And I want Nicole for the next few moments to talk about what is the fight.
One of the saddest verses in the Bible is Judges 2:10. It says, when all that generation had been gathered to their fathers, which means when they died, another generation arose after them who did not know the Lord, nor the work which he had done for Israel. So these are some statistics from Darrell Hall's Speaking Across Generations. Among the elders, 83% claim Christianity. I want you to pay attention to these numbers. 10% claim to be atheistic or agnostic. The boomers, 80% claimed Christianity. 14% claimed atheism or agnosticism. Gen Z, 73% claim Christianity. 20% claim atheism or agnosticism. Millennials, only 64% claim Christianity. 28% claim atheism or agnosticism. And then Gen Z, 62% claim Christianity. 30% atheism or agnosticism. But there's still hope. According to the Barna Group, the rumors of Christianity's demise among younger people are greatly exaggerated. They even call the Gen Z generation the open generation because they're open to Christianity. They're open to the Bible. They're open to the teachings of Jesus Christ. They trust their families. They even trust pastors. But don't think that this is going to be easy because the Gen Z generation, they have a lot of questions. And these questions need to be answered in a biblical way. Not only are they facing the onslaught of what is the truth, but also they're facing gender and sexuality issues. According to the Gallup survey, U.S. adults who identified as LGBTQ in 2012 was 3.5%. In 2021, it went to 7.1%. But I want you to also understand that sometimes this particular poll is not reliable because it has been used in the political agenda, which we've seen that happen in the last several years. What I really want to say is we're so grateful for Ryan and Elizabeth, who are here as a youth pastor and his wife, who are teaching our children, helping them to understand the issues that they're facing today, teaching them the truth of God's Word. There's one of my favorite quotes that I have used in many of our family calendars, and I quote it often, and I'm going to give it to you today. It says, and it's by Neil Postman, "Children are the living messages that we send to a time we will not see." Let me say that one more time. Children are living messages that we send to a time we will not see? What are the messages that you're seeing?
So, on one hand, we can be optimistic and know that, okay, so this cycle is starting again, and it's not like we're going from bad to worse, that there is hope, but it's not going to be easy because the world, the enemy keeps coming with false agenda to contaminate the minds of children, especially with regards to gender and sexuality. That's the biggest attack right now. And so we have to share the truth, but do it in a loving way. We cannot walk away and say, well, we're not going to discuss that. My kids know better. I'm here to tell you, your kids do know better, but they're not telling you the whole truth. They're not telling you everything. So on the surface, they may be telling you what you want to hear, but behind, they are struggling. Not necessarily with gender and sexuality, but they're struggling with life. They're struggling with issues. They're even struggling with their faith. So don't just walk away going, oh, they're good. My kids, boy, if they did that, I know what to do with them. No, you don't. The world has changed. The purpose of this series, and next weekend, we're going to have Ron Elizabeth up here talking about Gen Zs and Generation Alpha and how we need to make an impact in their lives. And it's not just for parents and grandparents. This is for all of us to understand the culture, to understand where they are, to affirm them, but at the same time say, that's not right. God's word says something different. Love and yet guide them in the right direction. This is the mandate God has given to us. Can't do that if we just laugh at people. Can't do that if we just dismiss them and say, they just need to get over that. You have to meet them where they are. You have to learn to speak their language. And when I talk about speaking language, I'm not telling you to get gimmicky. The gimmicky, if I were talking to boomers, talk about being groovy. We're not telling you to do that with Gen Zs and Generation Alpha. They'll laugh at you, okay? They will roll their eyes at you. No, speaking the language means understand where they are coming from, what their struggles are in the world in which we live, and then bring them in the right direction. Especially parents, if you are overconfident that you got this, you may be the one that God has brought here for this, because you need to hear this. Thank you, Nicole, for sharing this. Our goal is not to entertain, is to educate. Our goal is not to draw caricatures, but it is to truly come to know them. Our goal in this series is not to poke fun, but is to stoke faith. It is so important that on our watch, we don't lose our younger generation. It is so critical that we put all drama aside. People, listen, Satan will give you plenty to occupy you, especially in church, by the way. He'll give you plenty of stuff to keep you from doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is to seek and to save that which was lost. Our goal in this series is to win our young generation. In 1998, when Nicole and I came to this community, and in 99 I came as the pastor, I had to decide how I was going to lead. Now, when I was growing up, our church was sort of very old-fashioned, okay, old-fashioned. And so, old hymns, some of the hymns we sang sounded like the national anthem, okay? But in time, Dad began to change a few things, but that was almost time for me to make my way out and come to America. So I kind of grew up old-fashioned. So my tendency was to go old-fashioned. And we're sitting there with 15 people. And I said, we got to fill this church. We got to get people here. So I called up my professors and I said, can you help me? Can you give me some advice? I called up pastors of growing churches and I said, please talk to me. I called up church planters who were firm in the Word of God, who were firm on doctrine and sin, and yet they were drawing people. And I said, what are you doing that I'm not doing? And they used one word, change. I said, okay, we can change. Start with your worship style. I said, whoa. Those hymns got a lot of theology in them. Come on. You don't touch them. Anything else? They said, well, if you're not willing to do that, just know you'll be sitting there empty. I said, well, I'm going to take my chances because I'm going to preach the word. That's going to bring people in. And I preached the word. And guess what? They didn't come in. So I'm like, all right, reluctantly, we're going to work on this music thing and see what happens. So we began to change things a little bit at a time. Nicole remembers that because she would help with the music. And guess what? They started coming in. The Gen Xers began to show up. The millennials began to show up. And I'm like, now what do I do here? Because it actually works. So when we moved to our last location and began to change things, we went through the core values. This is before any of y'all came, okay? We went through the core values, the mission, the vision, the worship styles, how we're going to sing and what we're going to do. And here's the amazing things. People began to keep coming in. You see, I had to set aside my preferences for the gospel of Jesus Christ. That if I want to win not only my children, but also the younger generation, that I have to make a change, and it's not comfortable. But what the change is not just change for change's sake, that are we just going to go sing fast music with guitar and drums. It is to speak the language of the culture. And here's the amazing thing, it actually works. You know, when you study church history, here's what you find. Revivals and awakenings happen when churches began to speak the language of the culture, but they kept the gospel. So when boomers come to me and say, well, I like it old-fashioned, you're just going to have to get used to that, because I'm like, you enjoyed your Woodstock? Okay, great. Now in midlife you become traditionalist and you want to keep things the same way? Nope. We're changing. We got you figured out. You see, sometimes as a pastor, lovingly, I have to say, I love you to death, but that's where we're headed. And in time, people go, my kids are coming, my grandkids are coming, they're being blessed. I'm like, I know. Isn't that great? But I still miss those old hymns. I'm like, okay, all right, whatever. I hope you understand where I'm going with this. The goal is so we can win this generation for Jesus Christ, to stand before God on that day of judgment, and He says, what did you do? And I say, hey, with the resources you gave me, you gave us, the talents, the resources, Lord, we went out like gangbusters to win the culture for Christ. And here they are. Well done, good and faithful servant. Folks, that's what it's about. When sometimes sacrifices have to be made. This morning, I want to close with Paul's statement. How many of you agree Paul was pretty conservative? Or would you say he was a liberal? Did y'all really believe Paul the apostle was a liberal? Was Paul a conservative? Yes, okay. 1 Corinthians 9, verse 19. He says, for though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win the more. To the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, like the Gentiles, as without law. But then he clarifies, he says, not being without law, it's not like because we're going to reach the culture that we're going to say a pass to all the gender garbage that is happening in our culture. Oh, it's all good, it's all covered. Some churches are doing that. We don't do that. Sin is sin. Paul says, not being without law toward God, but under law toward Christ, that I might win those who are without law. To the weak, I became as weak. So if somebody says, hey, I'm struggling, anxiety, stress is too much. Well, I'm going to come to you as weak, so that I might win the weak. I became all things to all men, that by all means save some. That is the philosophy of this church. I have become all things to all men, that I might win, by all means save some. Now this I do for the gospel's sake, that I may be a partaker of it with you. Why does this series matter? Because souls matter. Oh, my kids are grown, whatever, I don't have to worry about it. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. On the day when you stand before Jesus Christ, you have to give an answer. How did you share the gospel? Well, I hear you, but I'm kind of old-fashioned. Here's my question to you. Please listen carefully. If doing it your way is the only way, how many souls have you won recently? Who have you led to the gospel of Jesus Christ? There's your answer. Paul said, I am all things to all people, so that I will win the more. None of us can be more conservative than the Apostle Paul. We are to go and reach the world, no matter who they are, where they come from, what they look like, our young people. And next week, don't miss it. Don't miss it. It's going to be phenomenal. How we can reach Gen Z, Generation Alpha, with the gospel of Jesus Christ.